Hello! Today's topic will be how to utilize edit mode in the Burning Crusade Anniversary. I will show you step by step how to move and make your UI by making my own UI. Let's get started. First, hit escape. Then, click on edit mode. At first glance, you will be bombarded with many options, so let's take it one step at a time. If you need to, you can click on the HUD edit mode box and move it around so it's not in the way. Now let's enable advanced option. Next, let's expand our options. If you don't already, I suggest enabling show grid. Depending on your style, you can make the grid smaller or larger. I prefer smaller. I also suggest having snap to elements enabled. This will allow you to easily keep things together, like your action bars, buffs, or portraits. From here, we can enable or disable what we want to see. If something is enabled already, you will see it highlighted with a blue box. If you disable it, it will temporarily hide itself while you are in the edit mode. Let's disable everything for now. As you can see, we are left with our portrait, minimap, chat box, and action bars. Let's click on our action bars. A new box will open. Let's click on action bar settings. Personally, I like utilizing all my action bars as I have a lot of macros that help me with my gameplay. I will enable all of them and hit close. As you can see, I now have far more action bars present than before. Let's click on action bar 1. From here, you will see number of rows, number of icons, icon size, icon padding, always show button, hide bar art, and hide bar scrolling. If you like to see your keybinds despite no ability being on them, you can enable always show button. The keybind will appear if you have an ability on them. Next, I suggest hiding bar art. This removes the griffins from the side of your action bar 1. Next, let's also hide bar scrolling, these little arrows to the right of action bar 1. From here, I will place the bars in order and change the settings on all bars, one at a time. I like to move my experience and faction reputation bars to the top of my screen because I don't like them in the area where my bars are. Next, I will move my bags and menu bar away from the center of the screen. I like to keep these in the bottom right corner, but you can move them wherever you want. Let's move all of our action bars in a nice line. I like to use 6 bars at the bottom of my UI as it gives me access to 72 keybinds. That's just about the right number if you do both PvE and PvP content. Because I don't like too much clutter, I will now reduce the size of each bar by 20%. I will also reduce icon padding to 2. This makes the bar significantly shorter and more condensed. I will do this step for action bar 1 through action bar 6. I will make action bar 7 and 8 vertical, and I will place these to the right side of my screen. I will reduce only the padding this time, as these bars typically do not have keybinds on them, and are used for professions, consumables, anything I don't use often enough to justify having a keybind for, but like to be able to easily click. I will now place action bar 3 through 1 on the center left side of my screen. After, I will place bars 6 through 4 on the right side. If by chance you play a class with a stance bar, I highly recommend getting Leatrix Plus and disabling the stance bar in their setting. It's just extra clutter that gets in the way. Now that we've finished moving our action bars, the next step would include moving your portrait. Let's re-enable target and focus under the frames category. Depending on how you play, you might not need to move your frames. However, I like to keep my portrait frames closer to the middle of my screen so I can easily see my health and the person or NPC I'm targeting's health as well. Reducing eye travel from the center of your screen to the edge of your screen can help reduce fatigue and help you keep track of the things that are most important. I like to have my frames close to the middle so I can see them easily with peripheral vision. I will also use the arrow keys to inch the target frame a little closer to my personal frame so that there is no gap between them. If you don't plan to PvP, your focus frame is something that is hardly utilized. You might not need to move it. However, if you do PvP, I suggest keeping it close. I keep it just slightly above my target's frame. This makes it easy to see my focus target's health, and if I really need to, I can easily click on the frame to target them as well. As a healer, this reduces the travel time between my raid frames if the target frame is closer and I need to click on them for any reason. Next is pet frames. If you are a class that uses pet frames, I personally put mine right under my own portrait. Now let's enable party frame. Click on the party frame. Enable raid style party frames. I like to keep this near the center of my screen, just off to the right. I also like to make these a little bigger and wider. This allows me to quickly see the health state of my party, as well as allowing me to see things that might directly affect my character, like fire on the ground or other effects that require me to move out of them. Some healers do put their raid frames beneath their feet so they can see more of the middle of their UI. This is completely your preference, so do what feels best for you. The only thing to keep in mind is keeping the raid frames near the center, but not in the center. This is so that you can see both the party state health and things you need to avoid with peripheral vision. Next is raid frames. Let's drag the raid frames to where the party frames are so they are in relatively the same spot. Now that they are, let's disable party frames so that they are not in the way of editing. Let's make the 10-man raid size a little bigger and wider. Next, let's click on the raid frame settings to customize the raid frames. I like displaying power bars. This shows rage, energy, and mana bars on the raid frame. I also enable class color, so I know what class I'm healing. Sometimes knowing if someone is a melee class or a ranged class can make your decision making more meaningful in a raid. There are typically a lot of mechanics that punish melee players more than ranged, making them targets of outgoing damage more often. I also enable pets. They need love too. However, if you're not a healer, I do not find it necessary to see pet frames. Enable display main tank and assist. This will make the main tank and assist have their own extra raid frame to the left of the raid frames. Making them easier targets to see their health and to keep an eye on. Enable show debuffs and do not enable display only dispellable debuffs. This allows me to see when people are affected by some abilities like Mortal Strike, something that reduces incoming healing by 50%. This is a physical debuff and cannot be dispelled under normal circumstances. This helps me decide what type of heal I should use on them. Or if the context is right and I don't feel their life is in immediate danger, I can safely not heal them until the buff drops, saving mana. Lastly, I will display health text and use percentages. I find percentages to be more impactful for my decision making for a couple of reasons. First, not everyone is safe at the same health. Someone could have 3000 health and be above 50%, or someone could have that same amount of health and be near death. Secondly, in PvP, a lot of executes can be used at 20% health. Knowing that threshold is a lot easier to see and helps making the right decision. It takes the guessing out of the equation entirely. Third, watching damage patterns during raid fights. If a tank loses 8% health per hit, I can clearly see it was 8%. That gives me insight as to how lethal an average attack is. We can now close the window. Before we continue, I do want to note that changing the size and location of these raid frames is shared between profiles. That means if you make the 10-man raid frames bigger and wider, your 25-man raid frames will also grow in size. As well, if you move your 25-man profile, it will affect the 10-man profile. The only workaround I found is to copy your profile after you've completed your setup, and to make a whole new profile for both 25-man and 40-man. There doesn't seem to be a way to have the three settings not interact with each other under one profile. A significant downgrade from Blizzard's previous settings where you can make more than 3 profiles, change their size, and move them anywhere independently of each other. If your layout is finished, head to the main screen of your HUD edit mode box. From there, you will open the drop-down box of layout. I like to name the layout I use as my main layout. Hover over your main profile layout and click on Rename or Copy Layout. Hit Copy Layout. In this case, I'm making a copy for my 25-man raid frames, so I will name it 25-man raid frames. Click on your raid frames, change the raid size to 25-man, make them the size you want them, and if need be, adjust the position according to your preferences. Repeat these steps again for 40-man content if you ever find yourself going back to a 40-man raid in the future. Now onto the chat box. I like the chat box to be deep into the bottom left corner. I also have bad eyesight, so I like to make it a little bigger. As you can see, we cannot move the chat box off the screen. I'm not a fan of the icons on the left, as I personally never use them. I would suggest getting Leatrix Plus to help adjust the chat box so that the icons on the far left side are pushed off the screen and hidden by enabling unclamped chat box in the chat setting. The last step of customization is the minimap. If you like it in the top right corner, that's cool. But if you're like me and you play League of Legends because you hate yourself, I like to place my minimap in the bottom right of the screen. I use Sexy Map add-on to turn it into a square and increase the size of the map itself. Now onto the Combat tab, Buffs and Debuffs. Now that the bulk of our UI is made, let's look at the remaining options under the Combat section. First, let's re-enable Buffs and Debuffs. I like to move them slightly closer to the left of where they currently are, just under my reputation bar. The debuffs will follow suit. For my cast bar, I use the add-on Quartz, so I will be disabling the cast bar. The pet bar will be moved to the right of my action bar 4, something I can see but out of the way. The possess bar is something that is almost never used, but when it matters, it really does matter. I like it when it's in front and center, just above my cast. I like to increase the size by 200%, and I like to reduce the padding down to 2. This makes it super easy to see when it does pop up, and easy to click any buttons if I need to use them. Now onto the MISC tab. We are now in the last segment of the edit tool. Status bar 2 is your reputation bar. If you don't want to track reputation, you can disable it. I like tracking reputation, so I keep it enabled. Equipment durability is important to track, so I will move it near my debuff area. Last but not least, the vehicle exit button. This is used for getting off flight paths early, mounts in later expansions, and more rare boss fights that also happen in later expansions. Because it rarely appears and only appears in specific circumstances, I like to place it near the center of my screen so that I can see it, but without it being in the way. That concludes how to use the edit mode for the Burning Crusade Anniversary. Thank you for watching.